Foster, welcome to the Heal with Kat podcast. I am so excited to have you on today and talk all things doulas, motherhood, poetry, femininity. I feel like we're going to go into so many fun different topics, but welcome.
Bring it on. Well, thank you so much, Kat. I'm so excited to be here, and I feel like we really aligned on a lot of things. So let's talk. I'm excited for our conversation.
Yeah, I really want to start off the episode just by having people, and myself included, understand
Mhm.
a little bit more of the ins and outs of who you are, even if you want to include like your life story and what brought you into what you're doing today.
Yeah, great question. Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm a chameleon. I've been so many things in my life, but I am overall a creative person, I think, first and foremost. So I currently am a poet and author, and I work as a postpartum doula. So I'm in the birth world, in the birth space, but I've also have a background as a filmmaker and a writer, producer, actress, kind of a lot of things film related. I was born in North Carolina on the East Coast in a house in the woods, grew up very hippie. My parents were vegetarian. I was homeschooled, all of those beautiful things. It was a really fun and free and creative childhood, I think. And my parents split when I was 8, and I think that took a big turn in my life. I have a younger brother, and the two of us really had to start to navigate two households and all of the ins and outs of that. I think that's where a lot of things changed for me. I started going to public school, but I was always in the creative arts. I was in photography, I was in theater, and then I went to NYU for drama. So I got my undergraduate degree at Tisch as an actress. And then about '08, I moved out to LA from New York and started my life here. So I've been here 18 years, started my family here. And then I transitioned after a loss that we'll talk about, a great loss that was a big life quake for me. I transitioned from acting into directing, and I started trying on my hat on that side of the camera, which really resonated for me. And then I more recently switched into birth world, and we can talk about why I transitioned away from film, but that's kind of broad strokes of where I've been and where I am.
But it's interesting how like your past life, we'll call it as a
Hmm.
creative, and now, creation, life,
Hmm.
birth, it's kind of the
Hmm.
synonymous theme of creation. How did you
Yeah.
move from that world into the one you're in now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've had a lot of letting go in my life. When I left acting behind to go into film as a director, I'm only best focused on one thing at a time. And I had to really lose the identity of actor and the dreams that I had when I was younger about being an actor for my whole career, even though it's still in the framework of film. And then more recently, I transitioned away from directing, and which isn't to say maybe I will, maybe I won't go back into it, who knows. But I think when the strike happened, a lot of things changed for a lot of people, and I really started to analyze like how I felt when I was on set. With some respect, I love being on set, but it's a very masculine energy. And I think part of what I brought to a set as a woman who's kind of in the low, there's not that many women directors, is becoming more and more, but as a woman bringing kind of feminine energy to a set was a relief for many people. It was a relief for many actors to be able to kind of tap into that energy. And when I say masculine and feminine, I do mean energetics and not necessarily gender. So that was really, I think, one of my strengths as a director was to kind of bring a softness to set in a high stress situation. But then reciprocally, for me, I did not feel like that was the best place for me. I was stressed by being on set. I was stressed by preparing to be on set. And I would come home from a day of working, whether I was directing or on someone else's set, and just feel totally depleted. So I had had a calling for a long time about being at a birth. I had a very visceral experience of wanting to be at someone's birth that wasn't mine, because I've had 3 births, which we can talk about. But I just had this calling, and I thought, I'll I'm going to take a break and I'm going to go pursue that finally after many years of hearing a voice saying, you got to be at a birth, you got to be at a birth. And then I dove into training as a doula, and I'm a full spectrum doula, which means I've been trained for birth, postpartum, abortion, and loss. But I really found my sweet spot in postpartum work. I realized the lifestyle of being on call was not for me and my family and my children especially, and just my body having to go at any moment and being up all night was not something I was willing to do. But the birth doulas in my orbit are incredible beings, and I like bow down to their sacrifice. But I really found that postpartum work was a passion for me. I feel like a lot of people get left behind after birth and don't have the support, don't know they need support. And it's starting to become more accepted, and people are more aware of postpartum support. And so I really hope to just keep spreading that narrative that this is something that's really important.
I am not a mother, but I had a good friend of mine who was kind of my first experience around motherhood and newborns. I'm the oldest of five, so I guess you could say, I've been around babies and I babysat, but
Mhm.
newborn was one friend that I have. And I will never forget that she looked at me one day and said, everyone always wants to know how the baby's doing, but no one ever asks me about me. And I was like, whoa, like, and that I have goosebumps when I say that. I never thought of that. You don't hear people talking about the like the openness around or the vulnerability around what the mother is going through. I mean, you see it, here and there on social media depending on what you're taking in, but I love that you really found your niche in an area where, gosh, I don't know, I feel like I didn't even realize that doulas could work postpartum. I thought it was just
Mhm.
pregnancy and the birth.
Mhm.
My next question is, what is a doula versus a midwife? What are the differences between that? Because you hear those
Yeah.
thrown around a lot.
Sure. Yeah. Happy to kind of pull back the curtain. So, a midwife is a licensed medical professional. There's various tiers of midwife, but they are going to operate in a birth more like a doctor would. So they are going to come at the closer to the last minute, catch the baby, and do the work that a doctor would with all the medical knowledge. They also do prenatals, and they do the midwifery model of care is, as I'm sure you understand, a little bit more whole person, like centered, taking into account oftentimes body, mind, and spirit in pregnancy. And the prenatal appointments are much longer. They're really talking about nutrition. So they are equivalent to a doctor. You might have a midwife at a home birth, you might have a midwife at a birth center or in a hospital. A doula is not a medical professional. We are a support system. So we are physical and emotional support for the birthing person and or their partner as well. And then of course in postpartum care there is newborn care as well. But physical and emotional support. So birth doula is going to be coming into the birth much earlier in the process. Maybe you're laboring at home for a while. The birth doula will come and support you a bit there. They go to the hospital for you. They can be an advocate for you as well in the hospital. So sometimes we think of sort of home birth and birth center, doula, midwife, this sort of more liberal, hippie sort of era. But we also have a lot of doulas that work in the hospital. And I think they're really, really valuable because the medical system is set up to kind of treat an illness, and birth is not an illness. So we have a lot of ins and outs and checking and fluorescent lights and not quite the experience that you might want for your birth. And so a doula can help put forward your agenda, remind people of your intentions for this birth, and maybe set the scene and also advocate, help with positioning and all of that kind of stuff. Some people are birth and postpartum. A lot of birth doulas do a few postpartum sessions. I come in postpartum, so I try to flip the narrative that a lot of people associate postpartum with postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, mood disorders, and things like that. And it sometimes I think is a shorthand for depression. But postpartum means after birth. So it's anytime after birth, which conceivably everyone who has birthed a child is postpartum. But I would come into the family's household for the first 6 to 8 weeks after birth and really support them in their transition into being a family. And that does look like physical support emotional support and just kind of all around care for this little family that's got, have them in my hands, kind of keeping them safe.
I think that's so beautiful. I think that so many women don't realize that they need more of that support. And I know even for me, like I'm away from my family. So if I were
Yeah.
to start my own family here, away from where my family resides, it would be so nice to just be like, oh, my doula is going to help me with it. Like then me and my partner can kind of focus on the parenting or like the
Yeah.
the building of the family in those first few weeks. What does it look like standard care for a doula postpartum? What are the things you're focused on, your values, even things that you help the women do or the partners do?
Mhm.
Maybe some more of the details would be so cool to hear about.
Yeah, yeah, great question. So if I always think of physical, emotional support, the pillars I want to talk about are rest and recovery. We cannot underestimate what the human body has just gone through, and that is physical. That means if you had a vaginal delivery, you might be doing sitz baths. I might be drawing up a sitz bath, which is a shallow bath that goes on the toilet, and we put herbs and different kinds of things, warm water herbs, and it's a soaking of the perineum after a vaginal delivery. So it's something someone might want. I do a lot of education. I want to teach my clients about their bodies, what's going on, what's typical, what's something you need to call your provider about. There's an infinite number of questions that come up both about the body and then about the baby as well. What do we do? How do we do this? What does breastfeeding look like, or body feeding, bottle feeding? If we are crossing over and doing a hybrid of nursing and bottle feeding, how do we navigate that? When should we call in someone who knows more than ourselves and our doula? When do we call the certified lactation consultant in? And when do we call our pediatrician or our OB, or when do we realize this is very typical and normal? Those kinds of things. I do a lot of physical support. So I personally do all kinds of things for the household to make sure that the person who just gave birth and their partner, if they have one, are resting when I'm there and doing very little, because my goal is to work myself out of a job. So by the time I leave, everyone feels really confident how to take care of their baby, that their body feels in better shape. So that means I'm going to do everything under the sun, like baby laundry, dishes, cooking, all of that. So rest and recovery, nutrition, and I do cooking and meal prep that really is focused on postpartum nutrition, a lot of high nutrient dense foods, warm foods, things that really nourish you, hydration, which you cannot underestimate hydration, especially if you're feeding off of your body, and emotional support and support from both me and your community and your family around you. So how are you getting that adult contact, right? Like I need to speak to another adult human, maybe someone who's been through this before.
Oh my God, I have no plans for children right now, but I'm like, I'm going to get a doula. I will immediately, first thing, I'm going to look at the pregnant sick and go,
Uh-huh.
I need a doula. Where's the nearest doula?
Exactly.
What
Exactly.
a
Also,
gift.
maybe you need a doula for your life. I feel like sometimes I need a doula. Come tell me if I'm doing things okay and what do I do next, and doula my life, please. So,
What a gift to be of service to somebody who really, really needs it. And I think a lot of women in our society, mothers are not mothers. We have this idea that we have to have it all together, that we have to be the good girl, that a lot of us feel like we have to put on this facade that we've got it and we can figure it out. And to some extent, yes, we're all capable and we can. But man, what a gift to just have people like you who are just truly there to be of service and be like, I'm just here for you. Like, I'm here to make it easier for you. I feel like more people need to embrace that gift that you
yeah.
give.
Thank you. That's so sweet. I really think I like to draw from history, right? So if we
Yeah.
go back to the time in which we lived in villages, we had all of this lived experience with our mothers and grandmothers and aunts around us. We had people to guide us, but also we were witness to other people feeding a baby off their body. And what does that look like? And what's a proper latch look like? And
Mm.
just kind of what goes along with that. There are other cultures, even today in our world, that do have a bigger sacred energy around a postpartum person. There are some beautiful rituals in other cultures that I would love if they came to the US. But that is has been seen, especially in more indigenous cultures, as a really sacred time and a sacred space. And we don't, especially in big cities, but here in LA for sure, in the US, we often live in kind of bubbles. We live away from our family, we live away from people that might have had experience with newborns, and we might have never seen someone pull out their boob and start feeding a baby, right? We just might have never witnessed that, especially for people who grow up as male in this world. They don't see it either. So I see a lot of like wide-eyed deer and doe-eyed dads and partners being like, I have no idea what I'm doing, how to support her. I can tell she's tired, but I don't know what to do. Teach me, please. And I'm not an expert, but I'm gonna try to help you find like what's intuitively right for me. How do I support this person, and what's right for our family?
That's so beautiful. I just love
Thanks.
it so much. Who was foster before you became a mother and a doula? I mean, I know that you talked about your career, but
Mhm.
as a woman, how has becoming a doula kind of shifted and transformed you?
Yeah, I mean, so my kids are 8 and 11, almost 12. So I have been a mother for now 12, almost 12 years. And I would say before becoming a mother, but also in this journey to where I am now, all of this time, I used to be someone who was very action oriented. I'm a doer. I'm an Enneagram 3. I'm efficient. I'm going to come in and get it done. I'm not going to be emotional about it. This is what needs to happen, and I'm going to do it. Certainly there's an element to that can come into play as a doula. Assess the scene and walk in and get it done. But I was fast paced. I burned myself out. I worked day and night into the midnight hour. I was a machine. And that is, I kind of believe there was a right way to live, and that this was going to success was going to come from this. And giving birth, having a newborn, being at home, spending more time with a brand new human being on this earth, it really slowed me down. I would say that was the biggest lesson I'm still learning, which is to slow down, to practice being more, to trust that I myself as a being am enough. I don't have to do something to make someone feel better. I can also just be present. I do a lot of holding space for both, for my children, for my partner, for my clients, for my friends. Like I'm just holding space for whatever's going on for them, which is something the 25-year-old me had no idea how to do or even put any value on it. So I would say also becoming a postpartum doula causes me to really slow down intentionally. There's a phrase I picked up somewhere in a book I read about working as a doula, which was before you get into your client's home, before you step through the door, stop and imagine a pot of honey is being poured over you, and move with that energy.
Mm.
Everyone's kind of, you want to be that, even if no one else in the space is, you want to be that calm energy and move slowly, and remember like to be very gentle. All of our pores are open in this time. So
Motherhood seems like such a profound transformation. And
mm,
I've heard the word used initiation before.
mm,
Who you are before you have a baby. You walk through a door, and on the other side, you're like a whole new person and you can't even help it. Did you feel that
mhm.
way as well?
I did. In hindsight, I think it happened slower for me.
Mm.
The biggest lesson I would say is that I know less than I think I do, and
Oh,
that's okay
yeah.
because I really believe that as babies, our souls choose our parents,
Mm.
right? So we come into this world for our own journey, but also to teach our parents a lot of lessons. And
Mm.
I did not believe that really when I had a kid. I was like, okay, this is my kid. I'm going to raise this kid the way I want to. And I remember my midwife saying, your baby has a plan. Your baby will come when they come.
Mm.
Your baby will be who they're going to be, and they're going to teach you to sit down, sit back, and listen to them. And it
Mm.
starts with we don't know when your baby's going to be born. We have this due date, but it's really a 5-week period, and all of that is normal. And there's this great aspect of surrender that we have to have from the moment we begin to think about having a baby. We don't know when we're going to get pregnant. We don't know when this baby will come or what this baby will be like. So surrendering to all of the things I don't know. And the older I get, I'm like, the less I know and the happier I am.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like having a kid's a humbling experience because I think, and at least for me in my head, I'm like, well, these are all the things I'm going to do when I'm a mother one day.
Hmm.
And then you always hear people go, yeah, you think, but you have no clue who your kid's going to be yet. So
Right.
take a seat. And also, I
Yeah.
feel my nephew, who's just turned 3 last week, he lived with us for a month during the summer. And I was with him every single day. I was kind of responsible in some sense for taking him to the park and going to the museum and getting his food and like doing all these things. And um, I realized that kids, they require your presence. They require you to just meet them where they are. And that requires a presence. And
Hmm.
I, childless, doing my own thing, I'm like, we got to go do. And
Hmm.
sometimes that regulation he gets is because of our presence, just sitting there and
Yeah.
being, like you said.
Yeah.
So it's beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, the kids are incredible. They're present with their emotions. Their feelings just come right on out. They're such great teachers for us because as adult humans, we've learned, okay, we're not going to express that. We're going to save that for therapy. You're going to, and they're so right here, right now. They don't have almost any age, until we get up into the teens, probably. They don't have a like I'll process that later or I'll think about the consequences of my actions. They're just here. I want this thing. I want it and I want it now and I'm going to do it if no one stops me. So there's a great deal that we all have to learn from children.
I'm going to shift the conversation just a little bit
Yeah.
because I'm really excited to talk about your debut poetry collection, this other
Oh.
part of you, the
Mhm.
poet part of you, called
Yeah.
Afternoon Abundance: Poetry for Wild Souls. And the
Yeah.
book just explores identity, spirituality, and transformation in motherhood. What are some
Mhm.
of the other themes that you explored in this debut poetry collection? And I'm going to ask kind of a two-part question.
Mhm.
Is writing this poetry therapeutic for you, or is it like downloads? Are you channeling? Like, what is the process of writing for you?
Sure, yeah. Let's talk about that part first.
Okay.
So I never considered myself a writer. I certainly didn't consider myself a poet. I think a lot of my identity was wrapped up in film as a director, and my ex-husband, my kid's dad at the time, was a writer, and so I kind of compartmentalized that. He's the writer. I'm the more actor-oriented visual person. We split in 2021. And a lot of my time in as a newly single person figuring out who I was, what was authentically mine. We had been together since I was 19. So I was with family and then I was with him in my whole adult life. I had never lived alone. So I began journaling, I began writing, and a lot of stuff just started coming out as poetry. And it felt like the freest form of expression I'd ever had as a creative. I intended for no one to see anything, I intended it to be completely private, and that's why it felt so free. And so for the first time, I had no filters on. The idea of like, you can't say that, which had always been a filter through social media, who I'm talking to, it was just for me and it felt so special. And I kept that idea where this is a safe place, I can express myself. And I began earlier, beginning of this year actually, is when I really ramped up writing and I started writing every morning with my coffee and just letting everything come out, whatever I was feeling in the moment. And a lot of it was processing things from the past. Everything is very real. This book is very raw. It touches down on like really deep feelings and truths that are kind of ugly. I talk about shadow self, which, vanity and ugliness and all of the shadow things that I was dealing with. And what does it mean to have a shadow self in there present and still like to include that in who you are? And so my experience of transformation has been to like really dig my roots deeply into the earth and then come up with something really beautiful, and that the tree that you those roots are going into the ground now grows wider and more colorful and more beautiful. So as the book progresses, we unearth these very real, true things that are authentic to me and my experience. And then a lot of vibrancy and a lot of light and life come out of that. So I do feel like a lot of this was channeled. My process was that I would sit down pretty terrified every morning because I did not know what I was going to say and or what was going to come through my pen. I was having coffee yesterday with a poet who called it spilling, that she spills her words onto the paper. Her name is Ariel Astoria. She's a beautiful human being, but I loved that idea. For me, it was channeling, and I would write and write. And then at the end of the week, I would type up what I had written so I didn't lose it. And I would read stuff and go, I don't even remember writing that. I don't know where that came from. I know what I was experiencing and what I felt when I wrote it, but I don't know where these words came from. I didn't go to school for poetry. I don't even study poetry in any kind of way. It's just my expression. And so for whatever reason, these things needed to be said. And if they came through me as a vessel, then that's what happened. And now it's in this book, which is right here. And it's very, very raw and very beautiful, all at the same time.
Mm. What a interesting journey of just like you tapping into your own intuition through this book, it sounds like, and
Mm.
really having no intention to share it with anyone. And then all of a sudden it was like, actually, maybe other people can be lit up by these words too.
Yeah. Yeah, that was scary actually. I continued to write, even though I knew I was going to start sharing some of the stuff and I was starting to share poetry on my Instagram and whatnot. Um, I still, every time I sat down to write, I still had the intention of no one's going to see this. And then later, when I would write it, type it up, I would have an an editor brain on and go, okay, actually, I can release this one or I can't. And that way it kept me free in my writing. So there are still some that will never see the light of day. And then some that needed to be a little more coded, that needed to protect some people. In my life. So I worked to code some things a little bit better so that it could also be a little more universal.
I'm in the process of writing something right now. I told myself I would not say what it is, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure you can guess.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a process as well of learning how to create space for myself, because before, when I started writing it, I was like, oh, I'm going to wait until the divine inspiration comes to me. Like, spirit's going to knock on my door and say, okay, today we've got things to
Mm-hmm.
tell you. And I've had to learn my own process in writing of, okay, you may not be totally in the mood for this right now, but you know that you're supported by beings who can help you channel this information, and you
Mm-hmm.
have to create that space. And it's hard because I work a lot with family as well. Like, I work a lot with
Mm-hmm.
intimate relationships with people that we sometimes learn to protect our whole lives. So I'm going to protect their image, or I'm going to protect this because I don't want them to get hurt, because we call it love, but it is our love for them. So I love that you were able to use the word coding, where you could still speak your truth and still get the messages and the channelings across without compromising some of those relationships. It's almost like that nice duality of like finding the flow between that both. I just really inspired by that when you
Mm-hmm.
share that.
Yeah, look, we have, as creative beings, we have to overcome the resistance of, if you've ever read The War of Art, it's great. It's a really quick read. And he says kind of the same thing over and over again, but the resistance is going to find you wherever you are and try to give you any excuses to not creatively output. So the scariest step is always just like sitting down and doing the thing, which is why for me, it needed to be habit. I spent every single morning, like I was like, I'm going to put one word on the page at the very least. And oftentimes it was a lot more than that. But if I allowed myself to skip a day, then the habit was broken and it was much harder to get back into it. When I went to the publishing side of this book, and there's two more books that will be coming out next year, This
Exciting.
is the first of three because I had written so much. So when I went to the publishing side, I stepped away from the habit of writing and I can feel like A, I miss it, and B, the hurdle to get back into it is higher. So habit is really important. And then my partner also says he's a public speaker. And when he goes to rehearse his talks, I'm like, how do you sit down or stand up and just say, I'm going to rehearse a 20, 30-minute talk now? And he said, it's too daunting. You can't say that. I have to tell my brain, I'm just going to practice saying hello to the audience.
Mm.
And as soon as I do that, I'm off and running and I'm excited to talk for 20 minutes. But that's a real hurdle. But taking it one tiny bite-sized step, I'm just going to write one word. I'm just going to write for 5 minutes, starting as a habit.
Well, the book sounds like it's a lot around. I mean, it's about the transformation of
Mhm.
motherhood, and we've talked so much about mothers in general. Would you feel comfortable sharing a little bit about your experience to the mother wound? We talk a lot about that, the mother wound in this community. You know, we're working on
Mhm.
generational trauma. I
Mhm.
specialize in helping women heal their relationships to their mothers, the mother within, the divine
Mhm.
mother. I would imagine that a lot of women base their ideas or feelings around motherhood maybe based on their mothers, is what I'm going to assume.
Mhm.
Did that have an influence at all for you in your book or your experience with motherhood?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a specific poem in the book that does talk a little bit about who who was mothering me and how do I sort of escape that. And not to say my mother needs escaping. I don't need escaping from my mother, but that there is an idea that is put on me as a daughter that I have to take this burden with me. And I believe it is our jobs as parents, gender aside, but like as parents to be self-aware, to look at what those burdens are we're carrying and to take that backpack off. And that's the work, that is the work you're doing. That's the work people do in IFS and internal family systems. That's the work we do in some sorts of spirituality and meditation and all of it. Like that is the work, is to keep going inward and saying, what can I take off that's not mine? I did find that there were elements of my mother that I found repeated in my ex-husband. There were so many similarities that I never saw until I kind of stepped away and was able to look at that and go, oh, I was in this relationship very much to heal the wounding that I had growing up. And everybody's got wounding. It's not specific. Like to me, it is, there are some beautiful things of my childhood and there are some things that are wounding. It's just what happens. I'm sure my children will unpack their things from me. So that was a really big aha moment to see, oh my gosh, I repeated a pattern. Very interesting. Also, my parents split when I was 8 and my brother was 4. And when I split from my kid's dad, my kids were 8 and 5. Um,
We call that
and I
age
was like,
mapping.
oh, wow. I was like very aware of it going through it, but I was like, wow, this all came at the exact same time. So, yes, there were similarities. And then there was in the choice to be free from that and to step away and to find my own voice, which I think is part and parcel to leaving my marriage, to venturing out on my own, to creating a different life for my children. And he's very much a part of their life. It's a co-parenting situation, but I had to redefine how I wanted to parent. And that was finding my voice, and that was also finding a voice that was different from my mother. And in thinking about the mother wound and ancestral trauma, I was thinking I know what my kids are experiencing, hopefully, and my mother, but I wanted to go back a little deeper. And I have realized that there's a lot of like money trauma around my family. And of course, depression era, grandparents feeling a lot of lack. It really resonated in my mom's generation of like, no matter how safe everybody was, everybody has an element of lack. And so I very much carried a lot of that with me. And this book is called Afternoon Abundance. I'm working on the abundance part.
Yeah.
Um, but I will have those voices in my head of like, we can't do that. That's too expensive. You're being swindled. We don't have the money for that or whatever it is. And I keep having to go, oh, that's not mine. That belongs to my grandmother, my great grandmother. We are fine. We have plenty of food. And I have to kind of like reparent my ancestors in those moments. It's a process. It's a process.
Thank you for sharing that because I know
Yeah.
talking about family, with someone you met an hour ago, always, it's kind of on the spot. But, I have this true, true, deep belief that every generation breaks a cycle of some kind, big or small.
Mm.
Every generation will. It's so common that ages get repeated all the time, like for good and for a bad thing, good and bad.
Mhm.
What is good and bad, for whatever things are repeated all the time. So, I think that sometimes we want to overcomplicate the ancestral healing journey by, and I'm guilty of this, digging into every single part.
Mhm.
But as simple as writing a book of poetry and really living in your truth, you've been able to break a cycle around women using their voice.
Mm.
And
Thanks.
it just came through you. So that's why I always tell people, like, don't judge yourself based off of this is what ancestral healing looks like. I mean, it's
Mhm.
so nuanced to every single person, and we're so
Mhm.
multidimensional in so many ways. Like, why put ourselves in a box when everyone else is already trying to? You know what I mean?
Very much so.
Yeah. Hey everyone, it's Kat popping in during the episode today to tell you about my free cycle breaker quiz. Do you ever feel like you're the black sheep of your family, or maybe you find yourself stuck in the same family patterns or dynamics over and over again with no relief? Well, what if I told you you could transform that role into something really, really powerful? When you take my cycle breaker quiz, I help you understand the childhood coping tools that are showing up in your adult life today. And by understanding how you show up with your family and the role you play, this can be the portal into understanding the patterns of your lineage. Ready to embrace your role? Go to catdow.com/cyclebreaker to take the quiz or visit the link in the show notes below. Your transformation from black sheep to cycle breaker starts right now.
I think to tie this into kind of the work that you do with families and the work that I do with families is that when people become parents, it is so important to remember that your child's coming onto this earth with a soul contract. So they're here to teach you something.
Yeah.
And it is undoubtedly going to bring up triggers for you from your childhood. I honestly believe that is why part of why they're here, right? To show us what we can't see in that moment. So it's so vital to go into parenthood being aware of that and being aware that you're going to get triggered for sure. Also, you're in survival mode for many months in the beginning. So that's triggering lack of sleep and lack of body autonomy and all of these things. So if you have a partner or whoever your co-parent is going into that eyes wide open and going, all right, here are some things that might come up here. There's going to be things I don't know about. How are we together going to handle being triggered? It might be in the newborn stage, might be in the toddler stage, might be later or all the time. Probably all the time.
I
But
was going to say,
how,
sounds like everyone says all the time.
I mean, some people love the newborn stage, but then they get into this like, this kid is autonomous and they're running around and that is triggering for them. So just going in aware and talking about how are we going to handle this? How are we going to have a code word that says like, okay, I need to tap out for a moment. I'm feeling triggered. I need to go in the other room, take some deep breaths, look at that later in journaling, and be a team about it because I can see the opposite happening sometimes too when people are triggered and then they lash out at their partners and now there's no team in this family.
Yeah.
So really kind of coming together on that and knowing we're all up against the trauma. So like, let's help each other with that.
It's a beautiful reminder. I think I heard somewhere that the some of the 1 to 2 hardest years of a marriage are when you first have a newborn and a baby, and that how that introducing a new human into the dynamic that, let's just say, you've had for 1, 2, 3 years with someone, like it's a whole different
Mhm,
change. So again, a
mhm.
better reason to get a doula, better reason to get the support that you need, which is so important. um how do
And I want to
you
say,
oh,
sorry, can
yeah,
I say one more thing
of course.
about that to speak to the people in your audience who may not have children and may not want children, or have gone down a path where maybe they're not going to have children for whatever reason. Um, I also want to say that, like, the couples and the single people in our lives that do not have children are such a vital part of our community. Um, it's a big choice in today's day and age to not have children. I don't know why, but parenthood is also very difficult. It's a very big responsibility. And to go back to what I said about us not having a village, you'll hear it all the time. There's a poem in my book about villages, but like, we don't have that built in right now. And so those members of our community, our friends who have the freedom to say, hey, let me give you a night off. I had a client whose sister-in-law came and was a night doula and stayed up all night with the baby so they could get a night's sleep. Like once a week for a few weeks. Her dad did it even. I was like, this is incredible. Um,
Oh, I love that.
so that's beautiful. And we have like the people in our lives who don't yet have children or may not, they get to come in fresh and give you a break. And that's really, really helpful. My partner does not have biological children. So when he is in our lives, he's really fresh to the whole scene. He's got a lot more energy than I do. And that is so vital.
I love how you put that, because so many people, I don't know why, but I mean, I guess being in my 30s, they, oh, I have kids, is someone going to want to date someone like me with kids? Like, yeah, look at all the positives that can come from that. I love that
Yeah.
shift of perspective.
Yeah.
But really, you brought up something really deep in me as you said that. Um, it's we want to be of service to the people in our lives. We want, you know, we want to feel connected to, I'm talking we, meaning people who don't have kids. We want to feel
Hmm.
connected to the people around us who do. I think not all of us, but a lot of us, I do.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so, yeah, it just brought up a lot for me around that desire for connection, and how certain people receive that connection or don't, and how
Hmm.
comfortable they are with it. So, I'm sure you come across that a lot in your work as well.
Yeah, this is a beautiful thing to have. I think children also need other safe, secure, bonded adults in their life that are not their parents. My kids we are very close and bonded, but I am so grateful that they have people like my brother in their life who does not have his own kids. So again, when he is here, he is crawling and climbing and all of the things. I'm like, thank God someone wants to do it, right? But that's a bonding relationship. And I hope that my daughter, if she has something on her mind that she doesn't feel like she can tell me or her dad, that she can go to her dad's partner or my brother and say, like, I got to share this hard thing. I don't know how my parents are going to react. Um, so you get to be that for now and forever long, however long you don't have children of your own, you get to be that person for your nephew, for your nieces and nephews and friends, kids. And that is really influential in a children's life. I can see it with my own children.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
I think, like we said, we just need more community in our lives. We're such a
Mm.
hyper independent society, and we're
Yeah.
losing track. I think with each generation, we're losing the safety and the trust that people can be there for us. I think
Mhm.
we're getting to this place in our world, which I could go off on a tangent about, but I
Mhm.
won't, where our trauma from the last 100 years, especially with the evolution of like technology and society, I think we're like in a pressure cooker right now, and everyone's kind of
Mhm.
just like trauma dumping online and in their families, and there's
Mm.
a rise of addiction and rise of chronic illness. Like, I mean, we're just getting to this point where it's almost like, hey, everybody, it's time to heal. Like, it's time
Mhm.
to heal, because otherwise, like, the pressure cooker is just going to keep going. So I don't even know why I said
Mhm.
that, but it felt like the right thing to say. Um,
Yeah.
how do you view the role of motherhood or the act of mothering in shaping society in the world? Because I know that you say that you believe that nurturing plays such a crucial role in collective well-being. So I'd be so
Mhm.
curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So I love this question. And I want to preface this sort of idea of masculine and feminine energy is, and also mothering to be an active verb that is not gendered specifically. We have a history of having mothers do a lot of the nurturing roles, but a father, a non-binary parent is also a mother in many respects, right? I think the mothering energy is soft, it is listening, it is that idea that I was talking about before about being and feeling as opposed to doing. My experience of this society and culture that we live in here in America, at least, is a very masculine energy. Like we get up, we go to work, we do the thing, we clock in, clock out, or we're on our computers all day, and it highly values productivity. It highly values money and ascension in the workplace and things that you can see and I can see and probably your audience can see can really lead to burnout and fatigue and addiction, all of these other things that
Even
we're
chronic illness.
exactly. Yeah. And your nature's going to tell you when to slow down, right? Nature is going to, I wrote a whole article on the Drill magazine about how when I was a kid, I was going to school, middle school, and working really hard and doing all the things and getting straight A's and all those bogus things. And whenever Christmas would come, I would get sick every time because as soon as I had a break, my body would just shut down. And it was, nature's way of saying, stop, do less, do less. It's a
Mm.
long lesson for me to learn. Um, when we're pregnant, we can do less. We have to learn that there's lots of obviously very fit people and continuing to work out and all of that. But there is an element of some things you cannot do when you're pregnant. You have to start to lean on other people a little bit, especially the third trimester. So there's a slowing down that comes with motherhood and this nurturing plays this role all throughout society that says, hey, we need to all collectively slow down. Healing is a mothering tool. When a kid skins his knee, the mother bends down and looks at it and sees him and sees his tears and wipes them away and gets the band-aid and listens to his pain and holds that space. Where, are they being productive? Like it's the antithesis of that. Nothing
Mm.
happened. We're just healing and we're nurturing. I
Mm.
think doulas come into the birth space to do that, to not be this masculine energy of running around and trying to fix all of the problems of birth. I'm putting those in quotes here, but instead to just accept, look at what's here, listen to what's going on, listen to the sounds that are being made from the person who's giving birth, and assess from there. I think we can all tap into that energy, whether you're a parent or not. It just
Mm.
happens to be a bit easier if we're really being present with a child to learn that, like, this is a different pace than what the rest of the world is. We talk about this a lot. The kids come into this world and they're these bright-eyed souls. I've held newborns, day in and day out, and I look at them and they kind of look up at me and look around. I'm like, I know you're here on this earth, right? It's pretty cool. But we have all these rules in society that we just made it up. And so then these kids are struggling because they're having to learn the rules of society that they didn't come into this planet with. So there's a gentleness there too. Really
Mm.
has to be able to teach that.
This conversation I could have all day long. I'm such a weirdo. I'm telling you, I don't openly talk about this a lot, but it seems like the right place to. I am such a weirdo where I will literally like daydream during the day about emotionally connecting with my kids. I can't wait for like if they something happens for me to just be like, oh, like let me hold you. It's like this. I mean, I really want to be a mother, and I think that's part of it. It's
Mm,
like this deep desire to be a mother.
mhm,
And, I'm going to be 34 next month. So I'm like, I should probably start having these important conversations.
mm,
But nothing excites me more than knowing that I get to hold space and do the things for a child that were not done for me. And I think we all have opportunities, whether you're a parent or not, in society, with our friends, with our partners, with nephews, with
Mhm.
nieces, with whatever, to do that more, to be more of a compassionate witness for the people in our lives. But like you said, children need it to like the nth degree because they're relearning, in the terms of what I believe, they're relearning how to
Mhm.
be a human, and they're
Mhm.
learning the rules of society and how things have changed since the last time their soul was here, and
Mhm.
so many things. I'm curious, do you work with Mother Mary at all, like as a deity or anything?
No, I think I saw it briefly on your Instagram, but I'm not familiar, so please tell
Oh no,
me.
I just thought it was so synonymous with what you were saying. I mean, I with my mother wound, and even my paternal lineage has quite a mother wound as well. Immigration from their mother country, from Lebanon, and having to come to the U.S., and even with my grandmother as well. I just, when you were explaining that, I was like, man, that's really what Mother Mary is, like an example for me, and
Mm.
not in a religious context, just as like a deity or someone, a being to work with, that
Mhm.
nurturing, that holding space, that care. It just makes me think of Mother Mary. So I was curious.
Yeah. No, I'm not as familiar. I think that's beautiful. I think in some respect, that's what I'm trying to pull out of myself more
Yeah.
as someone who's been so in their masculines for
Yeah.
so much of my life. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Mm.
beautiful. One thing about the postpartum period that you brought up that I want to
Mhm.
kind of circle back on, you
Sure.
mentioned that it's often a misunderstood part of a mother's journey. It's commonly overlooked. From your perspective as a postpartum doula, what are the biggest myths and what are the biggest truths about this, we'll call it sacred yet challenging time?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think one myth is really that this postpartum period is 6 weeks. There's a very odd thing where you don't see your doctor after birth until the 6 week mark, and then that's the only time you see them unless something's wrong. And they're supposed to give you the like, okay, you can go ahead and exercise and have sex now. Bye. Hopefully most doctors are not like that, but there's a lot that it's a very quick appointment. Postpartum, as I talked about, is after birth, right? So there is so much that goes on within our bodies, within our hormones, with the gray matter of our brain that changes after birth. The hormones, depending on who you ask, can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months to regulate. Continually regulating hormones as you're breastfeeding, if you have a long breastfeeding relationship, then that can really continue to be an ongoing change. And then our brains, there's some studies that say it doesn't even finish adjusting in for like 6 or 7 years. And then some people will say you're perpetually postpartum because you've given birth and now
Yeah.
you're after. So that is a myth that I think will then tie into how long do I need support for? When are people going to stop visiting? And all of these choices that are made of like, by 6 weeks, I should be fine. And everyone's recovery is different. How you gave birth, whether or not you had any birth trauma, like small t or big T trauma in that experience, and just where you are emotionally. Where did you come in? What place were you in when you came into it? And now where are you after? So it is a very long process. So I always want everyone to give themselves grace, and the ability to know that healing is not linear. It is ups and downs here and there all the time. Um, Secondly, I think the myth, and we talked a little bit about this, that like if you're lucky enough to have a partner in this journey as a parent, like my partner and I will be fine on our own. As you said, we're what did you say? Hyper individualized society?
Hyper-independent
Hyper
society, yeah.
independent. Okay. So
That
we think
masculine side.
right, exactly. We think we can do it all on our own and we'll be fine. And there is also a myth that's sent to women of like, you can have it all, you can do it all. I'm strong and independent and fierce. And that's wonderful. And there's so much of that in us. But also, we're healing sometimes from a major operation and sometimes from a major opening of our souls between our legs, right? This is a huge thing. And it not only requires care, so family, friends, multiple people, doulas, support systems, but also just the acknowledgement of within yourself that this is a long process and it's okay to rely on other people. I am going to rely on other people now for a long time. And you will, your kids will be school age and you'll be like, hey, can you please come and pick her up from school? I can't make it. I'm stuck at work. Like, have a play date. And the other person be like, thank God, someone to play with my kid, right? Like, it's a community space. We all need to learn to do that give and take. And you're not no gold star for doing it on your own. Really,
Mhm.
it's this leads to burnout. And lastly, I would just say the myth of I need to get back to where I was before
Mm.
birth in any respect. Body, of course, there's all of this stuff thrown at us that like you need to get back into your pre-pregnancy body weight or size or anything, but also your mind and your spirit have undergone a massive opening. You've opened a portal that now takes a long time to close, and you are a butterfly now. We do not ask you to go back in the cocoon and go back to being a caterpillar. Like, how do I adjust to my new normal? And how do I accept everything about where I am right now? And that there's no place to go back to. We're all growing, we're all evolving. We don't go back to anything, right? We just take it, okay, take that with us and hold on to that. So kind of myths and truths in there on both sides, but
Well, I
yeah.
mean, when you're talking, the one thing I'm thinking about is, and like I said, I'm not a mother, but I already feel pressure to do things a certain way when I become a mom one
Mm,
day. I feel like
mhm.
I just really, I follow a lot of like birthing accounts and uh, holistic accounts and natural home birth account. Like I follow a lot of different things on Instagram, but I think to myself, like some women can't help that they don't breastfeed, and
Oh,
some women prefer to have a night nurse, and like and it's such a unique experience to be a mother, and yet you I think there's so much shame for women about how they choose to mother and what's the right way, what's the wrong way. What
mhm.
piece of advice would you give to any woman who is feeling the pressure to mother a certain way, what's right and what's wrong, and all the expectations?
Yeah.
Like, what would you tell her?
Yeah, well, we're in an age of information overload. You could look up how to give birth or how should I parent, and you would go on for 7 lifetimes finding information that is all conflicting. I hear it from clients all the time. There's information that's conflicting that this person had this experience and they had this experience, and which is right. It is primarily about tapping into your own intuition and tapping into what's right for you. You created this baby, you brought this soul into this planet, and now your job is to connect with that soul and be curious and try to figure out what is this being trying to show me? What does my sacral center say in this moment? Everybody on the internet will tell you you're right or you're wrong. So that's cool because we can go explore things. If you are interested in a home birth, you can now go watch them. You can see what it could look like. Um, I myself had an intended home birth for my first baby, and we ended up with a cesarean. So there's best intentions as well. And then life and nature and other things can happen. So we have access to all of that. But at a certain point, unless it's fun to research, perhaps put that part away for now. And like, you're doing your research time and then you put that away and then you kind of sit with all that information and go, what does my gut say? What does my sacral center say about how I want to do this next thing? And really just being curious and being open to change.
What a beautiful reminder to be aware of your values
Mm-hmm.
and to be
Mm-hmm.
aware of how your body feels in relation to the things that you read. I mean, your body can tell you so much. Like, I don't know, I just feel like I've read things about birthing things and I'm like, "Oh no, that's not for me." Like I feel like you can tell when your body kind of flows with something, and then you can
Mm-hmm.
tell when your body's kind of like, "Oh no, this works for me, this doesn't work for me." And
Right.
who's to say that your baby doesn't need the things that you intuitively feel are right for you. I mean, every baby is
Mhm.
different. Every baby's needs are different. Some babies sleep on their own right after 8
Mhm.
weeks, and some babies, I feel like they don't sleep at all sometimes for years. So it just depends. I don't know. That was a good
Yeah, it's
example
a
of the co-sleeping, but
well, it is. There's all these kind of like sort of quote unquote controversial issues or debates like should you do this, do that? Should you use the snooze? Should you have a co-sleeper in the bed? Because you have a co-sleeper out of the bed? Should they be in another room? Like, well, when does it cross a line? We're going to have the baby here for now, but when is it too far? And that is such a personal decision. It's such
yeah.
a family-based decision. When I work with my clients, I'm not there to preach any particular method. And however I raise my children is completely irrelevant to how you're going to raise your
Yeah.
children,
Yeah.
right? So that's a process to unpack what feels right for you, becoming embodied and understanding, like you said, like, what does my body say about this, what does my body say about that? That's really important because that is learning to trust your gut. How do I feel when I've had this baby like next to me all night and it doesn't feel good? Okay, so what are we going to do now? So yeah, it's a really personal decision. And gosh, there's so many factors at play. What are your health conditions? What are your,
Right.
how do you feel when there's somebody touching you in that way? What kind of trauma to your body have you had, right? These are things that go into just the decision to breastfeed. Um, some people really don't want that relationship with their baby. That's fair. And there's all these other beautiful things. We have formula, we have donor milk, we have these like human to human milk sharing resources. But that's so cool. That's a real big benefit of having the internet and social media and all of that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, tapping into all of that is important.
Oh, I
Yeah.
just love this. I love this conversation so much. I feel like we've really gotten to know your true gift and passion, and really taken the last hour or so just to kind of understand what you're here to serve and what you're here to do on this earth. So thank you so much for what
Mm.
you do and supporting so many women, and thank you for your knowledge and your wisdom. And I would love for you to tell the audience where they can connect with you, where they can buy your book, where they can find you, all the things for connecting.
Sure, of course. Yeah, best place is always my website, which is myname.com. So fosterwilson.com. The links to buy my book are there. It's everywhere books are sold, basically. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Bookshop. It's in a bunch of indie bookshops here in LA as well. But you can also buy directly from me if you want a signed copy. That's cool too. Reach out to me on my website too. My email's there. You can say hello. My doula services are there. But that's the best place. We can have a chat. You can sign up for my newsletter too, which occasionally I'll send out a little hello, here's what I'm doing kind of thing. So
Yeah, we'll link all that in the show notes for
yeah,
you. But thank you so much for your time and coming on.
thank
This was such
you.
a lovely conversation. And I
Oh,
hope
I
people
agree.
are going to go buy your book and receive your wisdom and your channelings. And also, if there are people located in LA that are listening, that they know you're a good resource for them too.
Absolutely. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for having me. It's
Yeah.
been such a pleasure talking with you and
Yeah.
channeling whatever's going on in the energy today, all about mothering. I loved it. Thank
I
you,
love
Kat.
it. Oh, you're so welcome. Thanks.